everybody. I'm Maureen Droney, Cal State San Francisco graduate, 1989. I've worked in music one way or another most of my life, and for the last 15 years, I've been with the Recording Academy, which is the membership organization behind the Grammy Awards. The Grammy Awards, you may or may not know, are the only peer-voted music awards, meaning it's our members, the hands-on music creators, songwriters, artists, musicians, producers, and engineers, etc., who vote in the awards. The Grammy Awards telecast is the largest physical production of an annual award show and one of the most complex audio productions in television. The show has won numerous Emmy Awards for sound, and it's always pushing the technical envelope. It was the first major award show to venture into HD TV and surround sound, and it is always outfitted with the most advanced tools to ensure the highest fidelity for the evening's performances. We call it music's biggest night, but I can also tell you it's audio's biggest night. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons I went to work for the Recording Academy was that I got a behind-the-scenes technical tour of the 2005 Grammy Awards telecast, and my mind was blown by the production and the people working on the production, who are all about excellence. I wanted to work with them, and now I do. So today, I'm here with one of those people, Michael Abbott, who is head of audio production for the Grammy Awards telecast. Mike also provides audio engineering production management for some of the other biggest events in live broadcast, from American Idol and The Voice to the Country Music Awards, Olympics opening and closing ceremonies, presidential debates, FIFA World Cup opening ceremonies, and for more than 30 years, Grammy Awards telecasts. Please welcome Michael Abbott.
Thank you very much, Maureen.
So today, we're going to talk about the past, present, and future of major productions through the lens of the Grammy Awards. But first, I'm going to level set a little by providing some of the pre-pandemic Grammy Awards show logistics. For the 61st Grammy Awards telecast in January 2019, there were 35 songs performed on 17 different setups. Rehearsals, sound check, and camera blocking with the performers took 3 days. And as those 3 days of rehearsals are done out of sequence, the dress rehearsal on the afternoon of the actual telecast, usually Sunday afternoon, is the first time we see how the sequences between performances with the set changes will work. So inevitably, there are logistical issues that develop during dress rehearsal. After dress, it's kind of an interdepartment post-mortem that's followed by a quick reset for the top of the show, and then the 3+ hour broadcast starts shortly, like 2 hours thereafter. A few fun facts. On any given year, there are something like 160 tons of lighting, sound, and set pieces hung from the ceiling of Staples Center, where the show airs, requiring something like 400 chain motors to hoist it up. All that is hung from more than 500 points in the ceiling, and it takes approximately 6 days for a crew of 36 riggers to load in and hang all the equipment before rehearsals can even begin. And there are approximately 400 microphones, 220 radio frequencies for all of the wireless equipment for audio and communication, and more than 1,000 lights, with usually 4 lighting programmers. Altogether, there are over 200 technicians and stagehands, more than 60 of them just for audio, and 18 stage managers. Many of this team have been an integral part of the show for years, and overall on site, we figure there are 500+ years of live broadcast experience with the current Grammy audio team. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and let's start with the past. And Mike, give us a bird's eye view of how, prior to 2021, the Grammy Awards show came together.
Thank you. That was very detail-oriented, of course, and that's kind of how we approach the Grammys in general. There's a lot of specific information that we cull. About 6 months out of the year, I start working with the Grammy broadcast mix team, Eric Schilling and Tom Holmes, and we look back on the previous year to learn what evolved, what happened, how best to take the next year, step by step. And it's an ongoing evolution, as it has been since I've been doing the show for, as you described, 3 decades. That year which is hard to remember to a degree, given what we've gone through the past
Right.
year, all of us. Um, it's the old school approach how we've done things for many years, where, as you described, we rehearse everything out of sequence. We're mindful that we're doing things out of sequence so that we know how we structure the various acts, the mixers, and the stages they're on, and so on and so forth. Uh, the show as it evolves with the talent leading up to the actual week of rehearsals is one of the major challenges, because every single artist wants to have their Grammy moment on the show, and this is kind of what the mantra was: producing a Grammy moment for each of these artists. So their creative, as we call it, is constantly evolving, and audio kind of is chasing those tails that are wagging at us and trying to get what exactly it is the artist wants to do, and leading right up to the point when they come onto stage for the dress rehearsal, which hopefully is the last pass of any changes. uh, we're getting new tracks where there's track embellishment, there's key changes, there's all sorts of dynamics involved. And the team that I'm blessed to have to work with over all these years knows this. We've had the unfortunate passing of Whitney Houston, which the show
You remember
scaled
that was the
into.
night before the show, and
Yes, yes,
rehearsals were already done, and you guys turned on a dime.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Ken Ehrlich at the time called us in and said this is what he planned to do, and we scaled into it, and we had a special performance. I believe it was I don't remember exactly. Smokey, I think, and Justin Timberlake, something like it was a real hybrid performance. And then Paul McCartney went from what he was doing to, oh, we're going to have a 26-piece orchestra on a morning of the show. So all of a sudden, we were able to accommodate that because we have like a quiver full of audio assets on site. We have great support from a variety of manufacturers that we've nurtured over the years, and it benefits both the manufacturers and the show itself, because it allows us to have the best quality hardware to do the audio with.
So you have multiple small stages set up in the um, underneath Staples Center with different artists' acts, and they just get rolled onto the stage in order, and then rolled off to the stage in order. Because this is one night only. Is the other thing that always amazes me, how much goes into all of this for one night only. So they're loading out right after they take them off the stage, right? They roll them down the ramp, and you
Yeah,
know.
there's roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 plus 12, 8 by 12 or 12 by 12 or 8 by 8 or 4 by 6 dollies that we set all the equipment on with multi-connector cables, so we can quickly move in and out, unlatch, and be guaranteed with a modicum of repatching when we do the dress rehearsal and the show. So we know kind of how the stage is set up, and it's typically the set changes are anywhere from 5 minutes to less, given the amount of scenic elements. We have two main stages. We have a satellite stage out in the house, and then we have the downstage center thrust, where some performances are, or the president of the Recording Academy would give his speech.
And sometimes you have peripheral stages, like out in the plaza, Staples Plaza, and wasn't you two on a boat somewhere?
Yeah, we've had Foo Fighters across the street at LA Live that we fibered over to, and we were able to mix in the existing platforms the two music mix trucks that we use. For YouTube, I'm sorry, in New York, out at Statue of Liberty, of all things. That was a complete remote that we brought in. We had Amy, um, what's her name from England,
Amy
the
Winehouse, yeah, from England, that's
Winehouse,
right.
live in a 5.1. We did Hamilton,
I was just going to bring up Hamilton,
Hamilton,
the Hamilton cast, yeah.
and the challenges are that we, as you mentioned, the show is published or broadcast in a 5.1 format. And 5.1 for broadcast versus 5.1 for a DVR or a Netflix show uh, is presents its challenges. We have to adhere to center channel. We don't put the vocal in the center channel because people tend to record the vocal channel and then put it on YouTube, which is a raw vocal. So to protect the artist, we separate it into the left and right. We diverge it,
Wow, it's interesting.
and we put, the reverb and the schmutz, as we call it, on the vocals and wrap it into the surrounds. And that's kind of how the surround mix develops. So when the artist wants to do it themselves, we go to great lengths interfacing with them. On this year's show, we had BTS that wanted to do their own mix, and I've never been given anything than a couple of tracks for their performances to playback for their vocals, for them to sing with their vocals. This year, they gave us all their tracks the way we worked with them, and we developed the 5.1 mix. So it sounds simple on paper, but the execution is a lot of structure that's developed over the 20 years that now we've been doing the 5.1 mix. The two trucks are two different people, and typically when you have two engineers, you have two different sonic signatures, so to speak, with their
So
mix.
they alternate between the sets, right? Though.
It depends on, yes, for the most part, they A stage, B stage, or center satellite stage, what have you. But what we had a great recording academy consultant with us a few years ago, Ed Cherney, who uh, brought and developed a strict attention to the sound field so that the two mixers were using similar effects, similar placement of the vocals versus the instrumentation, similar to what the surround field consists of. And it gave the overall sound design of the show a more cohesive presentation. So you would be hard pressed, even somebody with trained ears, to hear who was mixing the show.
Now, let's dive into March 2021 and putting on the show during a pandemic, which turned out not to be just another Grammy show, but a show which the LA Times said hit all the right notes. The Times went on to say, expected to be another COVID era award show disaster. Instead, the 63rd Grammy Awards delivered its best telecast in modern memory. It was a refreshing departure from the Zoom screen style used to bring other live events to life since the pandemic. And the Times concluded, the Grammys have their groove back. Now, admittedly, the ratings were down, but we'd actually addressed that prior to the show with press comments from both CBS, our home network, and Ben Winston, the show's producer, who, of course, are well aware of the overall drop in broadcast television viewers, which we'll also address a bit when we talk about the future. So, Mike, what was it like to produce this 2021 think outside the box experience?
Well, again, we started as we normally do, really starting to look at the aspects of the broadcast in November. And as we had the surge here in Los Angeles, it became apparent that every production that I work with is heavily concerned with the safety and well-being of the crew. So at the point where we saw the handwriting on the wall with the COVID surge, the producers and everybody, Recording Academy, CBS, decided to pull the plug on the original date and move it to when we did the show in March. Uh, Good, bad, and indifferent. It presented its own challenges because now, as I alluded to earlier, that the artists have their creative thoughts. Now it became, again, as we got so close to what the creative was going to be of the show, everything got put on hold and the creative continued to evolve. So having that to look at as we got closer and closer
Oh,
to
you
the
mean
show.
like because we got delayed? We'd originally started and then we're delayed till March. So
Yes.
there was it was already in progress, and then there was a halt to give people more time to think of things that they
Yeah,
wanted to do.
which God bless these artists. They, as I said, they really want to have their moment, their statement, what have you. So as the show evolved, we it was going to be taped, the musical acts for the majority or for all of them. We had one scenario where we were going to be at one location outdoors. That moved because of the weather concerns. We ended up going into the LA Convention Center because it's a vast space compared to Staples. And our producer, Ben Winston, who this was his first year to produce a show, had a vision that was very unique of what he wanted to do in the first place. I'm not sure if it was the same vision if we would have had a live show with a live audience at Staples, but it gave some ability to think out of the box, which presented, as you all saw that saw the show, a very lush, verdant set design that, in its sense of community with the artists playing to each other simultaneously or one after another, and the artist, as you may have seen in the broadcast, would be watching the other artist perform. Very unique approach.
Brilliant.
It produced something that, and an intangible, I guess, that everybody kind of keyed into. Here was something that was out of the box, different from all the other cookie cutter award show approaches that we've seen in this pandemic. Um, it, 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 the challenges were so much in as much as the artist could only have 8 personnel besides the band on site. We were challenged with people couldn't be upstage of another person singing. We couldn't have
Right.
horns
Right.
playing live. The COVID protocols that we faced in this environment that we've been in for the past year really have to be, they allow us to have to rethink what we're doing.
Yeah.
The pre-records with choirs. So when we got to on site for the 3.5 days of pre-tapes, that in itself was another challenge because we could only have a certain amount of crew and staff on site, and everybody's zoned into A zone or B zone. A zone is wherever the talent is, and when the talent's not there, it turns into the B zone. When they come in, everybody's unmasked and face shields. We're all tested every other day with PCR tests. Very unique environment. All my engineers were all socially distanced in the space off stage. We had at least like a 4-foot egress between each workstation. We had 4 consoles backstage. We have our split world. We have the RF central where our 50 plus microphones are programmed and monitored for RF frequency interference.
Split world, for anybody who doesn't know, is where all the different cables come together and are sent everywhere they need to go, right? I wish you people could take the technical tour I did. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
I
Mike.
forgot we don't have pictures probably following this. Perhaps that would be
Right.
helpful. But yes, the way that we cable up and connect all the microphones to the distribution system that sends the microphones to all the different mix positions. You've got your music mix, you got your fullback, which is the stage sound for the artist with ears and speakers on the stage, and side fills for the dancers. Then we have our audience mics, which we didn't have an audience, but Ben, his vision was to have it very organic, so to speak. So he implored the crew that was in the space taping our video cameras and what have you to applaud at the end of the songs, which they did. It was typically, we're a jaded group. We've seen everything, and for us to applaud after a performance, I was very impressed. Um, we did a lot of extraneous work to make it sound live with people engaged. One of the big things with broadcast nowadays is that we don't have live audiences, and there's a factor when you don't have live audience. It's to me it's not as engaging as an audio mixer. If I don't have a live audience, it's hard for me. There's a disconnect. It's
Yeah, well,
sterile.
it's tough for the artists too.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
they thrive on that live audience.
Yeah, well, I've been listening to podcasts with artists and their comments. We have virtual live audiences. There's a company that has participants on video walls, and Ben, again, God bless him, he didn't want to do this. He wanted to have it very organic, and that's, I think, what one of the major factors on the broadcast that made it very different from everything else I've seen.
So, for those of you who didn't see the broadcast, it was the artists themselves that were the audience
Yes,
for most of the show. Yeah, I
yes.
mean, Beyonce was in the audience and also on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, we were very fortunate on the
An
night of the
intimate setting.
we were very fortunate on the night of the broadcast to have the artist, the nominees, sitting in the audience. We had set up an entire infrastructure of Zoom remote participants as people didn't want to be on site because of concerns of the COVID. But I think this show was the first show that I've seen or been involved with where everybody that was in the as a nominee, I would say 90% of them, if not 99% of them, showed up and participated in the actual ceremony.
Can you just describe for another minute or so that actual stage we saw a lot of the time where the major artists were watching each other? That was, you could see Staples in the background, where Staples, where we usually do the show, in the background, and this was like an outdoor pavilion. Again, for those who didn't see it.
Right. That was the North Hall of the LA or North Pavilion, as you called it, of the LA Convention Center, adjacent to Staples and LA Live. And we created again, a very verdant, lush space with a lot of foliage and set dressing to continue Ben's vision of it being a very organic event where we're in a smaller, intimate setting as opposed to the 16,000 that we typically have at Staples. And, they wanted to have a connection still to Staples, to what we've done in the past. So they put the video wall up in front of it. And we were going to use the video wall. I'm sorry, we were going to use the wall of Staples to project that same video. But as it turned out, the Mother Nature was against us because we had the daylight savings time change.
Change. It was that
So the
weekend,
first couple
yeah.
hours of the show was in daylight, so the projection wouldn't work. So that was just one massive detail where we had to leap and react to and come up with another solution.
And I just want to mention also before we go on to the future segment is the wonderful idea of having venue operators around the country present awards or announce awards. That was
Yeah,
so touching.
that was a very nice touch because
In
we
their
all
venues, a lot of them were, right?
well,
Or
we know how the loss is huge in that industry, the touring industry, the live entertainment industry. Where it comes back and where it rebounds to, acknowledging the existence of those individuals, I think was very, very prudent of the Grammy, the Recording Academy.
so now in the time we have left, I'd like to talk a little bit about the future because a lot of things have changed. We have a lot of new technology and tools, and the future looks different than the past in live productions and big event productions. Mike, what do you think the future holds? And what could next year, perhaps, for the Grammys be like? Or for
Well,
shows in general be like?
yeah, I mean, going back to what you mentioned on the Grammys, we're always trying to be one step ahead, or as I like to say, two steps ahead of the next trend, the next technology. And the implementation of Atmos was one of the factors that we had in mind with the pandemic and the budget constraints. Due to that, we were going to do a Dante connectivity scheme for all the inputs, all the audio sources this year.
For immersive audio.
That was
For
for the audio, but last year we did the first stab at doing a Dante transport protocol with our RF microphones that all the artists use. This year we were going to do the instrumentation, and this would have led to phase three to be able to have an Atmos soundtrack, which requires a massive amount of connectivity via Dante to pull that off. Um, Moving forward, uh, the streaming that's going on right now, Live Nation just announced with another entity that they're going to install 60 streaming systems at their venues across the country. I think the future holds for at least my business. Streaming's not going away. This follows a belief I have, and I've been educated with, that as trends uh, and patterns evolve in a crisis, i.e., a pandemic, the technology and the trending of that technology gets accepted and integrated much more rapidly than it would in a normal working environment. So the IT networking that we conduct, most of the trucks that are on site use extensive IP connectivity. The networking that we do between the trucks and the remote locations and the network is becoming much more in depth and accepted than it has in the past. And I think it will continue to that point where the sports broadcasters are using what's called REMI, which is remote engineering from a centralized location, whether the big tentpole shows like the Grammys, the Super Bowls, the Academy Awards will have people remoted home to their living rooms, or an engineering boutique with high bandwidth is another question. I think, I go back to all of us working in close proximity. It's
Hmm.
very difficult. We're not allowed to be closer than 6 feet from each other. When you have a video truck that's got 25 people in it, and now there's only like six because they've all been outboarded to a Jelco trailer adjacent to the truck farm. It's changing rapidly, and I think change is good if it's employed and deployed properly.
Since this is we're speaking to a lot of education people in this audience, I believe, lots of educators. So one of the things I wanted to point out was one of my first conversations with Mike after things shut down during the pandemic, and it was, and people were out of work. I mean, the production people were out of work, and I was happened to be having a conversation with Mike, and he told me he was taking a networking class, and he didn't mean people networking. He meant just what he's talking about right now, remote networking class. And I'm thinking about that in relation to people who are educators. Mike has that kind of mind. I mean, he's looking at the landscape and people are, probably freaking out. How am I going to, what are we going to do? I'm on the road all the time. I can't go on the road. What's going to happen? He was looking to the future and educating himself with everything he knows over all these years. The first thing he thought about was taking a course to educate himself in what he saw coming. And I think that speaks to, well, it speaks to Mike, and it speaks to our crew, and the way people think about what they do and their work, and how much they care about it, and how educated they, and how they continually learn. But I think it also speaks to students, and having that kind of mentality that you can turn on a dime, and that you can get the resources you need to adapt, because today it's a constant adapting game in so many places, but in live entertainment and in entertainment overall.
Yes, uh, I think one of the most important factors in if I have had success is that I'm scalable and I adapt. And as I mentioned, we're not quick to adapt new technology, although we're now, as I say, we're adapting it much faster. But we do a lot of vetting, and we educate ourselves. The not being able to go to trade shows and be exposed to all the new technology is something I really dearly miss, as well as seeing my associates in a fraternal, so to speak, environment where we're trading notes. I have a lot of friends that work in the sports broadcast industry, and sports has always been the leader of innovation because of what they do at NASCAR, NFL, baseball, in terms of audio approach. 5 dot, they were one of the first uh, entities to start using 5.1 broadcast. So yes, when I'm sequestered at home, so to speak, because of the pandemic, I didn't, for this mainly, I didn't want to just sit there and go, oh, woe is me. I looked to broaden my horizons and develop some skill sets that I didn't have. To me, I used it as a time to reset. And I would say that if the students are listening, when you have an opportunity like I had, where I've been doing this a long time, and quite honestly, when this happened, within a week, I lost all my work for an undetermined amount of time. And that has not happened to me, I'm blessed, in 40 years, where I didn't know where I was going tomorrow, the next day, the day after. So now I've got all this time on my hands. For my mental health, that's why I try to go out and involve myself Also in acting, finding how my associates are doing, trading notes, communicating. I've spoke to every major sound company. I've spoken to people across the country. I've spoken to people
We were
overseas.
learning then. We were learning too how it was going to end up when we went back to work with the production people, the unions, the organizations figuring out how we're going to do it safely. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of the other, I belong to several unions because it's a necessary part of my business. And I went and I employed the leadership of the unions. They had to get ahead of this, along with the producers. We had to get ahead of this, and I think the broadcast industry, we've been castigated in the press by people saying, why are they working when we can't work, and why can they do this? Because we're getting tested every day. We're cognizant. Our lifestyles are as such that we're not leading a lifestyle of transmission. We go to work, we go home, we go to work, we go home.
That's just normal life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, again, adaptability is the key to, overcoming this. But in the future, again, a synopsis is that I think we're going to embrace this technology, and the patterns and the trends are going to be accelerated to the point where 5 years from now, both the viewing habits and the workflow for what I do for a living will not look the same in any degree. And I think that's in part a cause effect of this pandemic. Be it positive, it remains to be seen how many people will be employed that will be able to do this.
Right. This is great, Mike. I always love hearing what you have to say. So I just want to say to Cal State and the Entertainment Alliance, thanks for having us and letting us tell a bit of the story. And I know that since I got that first backstage tour, I've never looked at the Grammy Awards telecast the same. And I hope that this little chat does that same for you, that you can see sort of behind the scenes a little bit when you watch the show.